"You're seriously upset about a vacation?" My father said it loud enough for the entire restaurant table to hear. Forks stopped moving. My aunt lowered her wine glass slowly. My cousin stared down at her plate like she wanted to disappear. And my younger sister Chloe actually laughed. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "She's doing that thing again where she acts like a victim over everything." I could feel every pair of eyes sliding toward me while heat crawled up my neck. The waiter had just brought out dessert when my phone buzzed against the table. At first I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I glanced down. Chase fraud alert. $4,280 purchased, Alitalia Airways. Chase fraud alert. $2,110 purchased, Hotel Roma Lux. Chase fraud alert. $1,340 purchased, Italy travel reservations. My stomach dropped so fast it physically hurt. I looked back up at my father. He didn't even look nervous. He just kept cutting into his cheesecake like nothing happened. I swallowed hard. "Dad, why is my card paying for this trip?" The table went silent. Not uncomfortable silent. Dangerous silent. My father sighed dramatically and leaned back in his chair like I was embarrassing him. "Vanessa," he said, "not tonight." "No," I said quietly. "I'm asking seriously. Why are there almost $8,000 in charges on my account?" Chloe rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might stick. "Because you have the best credit," she muttered. A few people chuckled nervously. I honestly thought I misheard her. Then my father finally looked directly at me. "You weren't using the card," he said flatly. "And this is for family." Family. That word used to mean something to me. At 32 years old, I still kept trying to earn a place inside a family that had already decided what role I played years ago. The dependable one. The quiet one. The one who fixes problems without complaining. But not the one they loved out loud. I stared at him across the table while my phone kept buzzing with new charges. Airport upgrades. Luxury hotel deposits. Private tours. They had planned an entire Italy vacation without even inviting me, while using my account to fund it. And somehow they were acting like I was the problem. "You excluded me," I said, barely above a whisper. Chloe shrugged. "Dad said you'd probably say no anyway." "I never got asked." My father rubbed his forehead dramatically. "Because every time we invite you anywhere you bring negative energy." That one hit harder than I expected. Because for years I'd bent over backward trying not to be difficult. I paid bills when my parents got behind on mortgage payments. I covered medical expenses after my dad's surgery. I even helped Chloe make rent twice after she quit jobs she didn't vibe with. But somehow I was still the difficult one. Still the outsider. Still the daughter they could use without respecting. My aunt finally spoke up softly. "Tom, maybe you should have talked to her first." My father immediately snapped. "Oh please. Vanessa acts like she owns everything because she has a decent office job." I actually laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because something inside me cracked. See, nobody at that table knew the truth. Nobody knew that the card attached to those charges wasn't just some random personal credit card anymore. And my father definitely didn't know what would happen once those transactions fully processed. I slowly locked my phone screen and looked around the table one last time. Nobody defended me. Nobody said this was wrong. Not really. They just looked uncomfortable that it was happening publicly. And in that moment I realized something that honestly changed my life. I had spent years confusing being useful with being loved. My name is Vanessa Carter. I'm 32 years old and for most of my life, my family only remembered I existed when they needed something. I work as a financial operations manager for a regional consulting firm in Chicago. It's not glamorous, but I'm good at it. Numbers make sense to me in ways people never really have. People always assume quiet women are weak. That if you're calm, responsible, and emotionally controlled, you must also be easy to walk over. My family especially believed that. And honestly, for years they were right. After my mom passed away when I was 24, I kind of slipped into this invisible role inside the family. I became the backup plan. The emergency contact. The person everybody called when life went wrong. But nobody called just to ask if I was okay. Especially not my father. After Mom died, something in him hardened. And Chloe became the center of his world. She was louder, prettier, more social. The family favorite. The daughter who could do absolutely anything and still be defended. Meanwhile, I was treated like an employee nobody appreciated. Useful. Replaceable. Expected to sacrifice quietly. And the worst part? I kept letting them. Because some small part of me thought if I just helped enough, eventually they'd love me the same way. The next morning I woke up to 14 missed calls. Not from my father. Not from Chloe. From relatives. That told me everything I needed to know. They'd already started spinning the story. I lay there staring at the ceiling while sunlight pushed through my apartment blinds, and honestly for a few seconds I just felt numb. My chest still hurt from the night before. That deep kind of hurt that doesn't feel emotional anymore. It feels physical. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Denise. I almost ignored it. But I answered. Vanessa, she said immediately, lowering her voice like someone might overhear her. Honey, your dad is really upset. I sat up slowly. He's upset. Well, she hesitated. He feels embarrassed. I laughed under my breath. Embarrassed. Not sorry. Not ashamed. Embarrassed. Because I dared to react publicly. You know how your father is, she continued carefully. He probably thought you wouldn't mind helping. Helping? I repeated. Denise, they charged almost $10,000 to my account for a vacation I wasn't invited on. I know, sweetheart, but family gets emotional over money. No, I interrupted quietly. Family gets emotional over disrespect. Silence. Then came the sentence I'd heard my entire life. You've always been the strong one. That phrase used to sound like praise when I was younger. Now I understood what it really meant. It meant, you're the one expected to tolerate pain quietly. After we hung up, I opened the family group chat I'd somehow magically been added to overnight. And there was weeks of messages, photos, Italy plans, jokes, excitement. Without me. I scrolled slowly while this awful hollow feeling spread through my stomach. Chloe sending hotel options. My father asking which winery tours looked classy. My cousin Ethan joking, Vanessa would probably ask for spreadsheets during vacation anyway. Laughing emojis followed. Even relatives I'd helped financially were participating. Nobody once said, shouldn't Vanessa be included? That hurt more than the money. Way more. Then I saw the message that really got me. Dad, don't mention the card stuff in the chat. Vanessa gets weird about money. I stared at the screen for a long time after that. Weird about money. As if I was being dramatic for not wanting my account drained behind my back. I closed the chat and walked into my kitchen feeling strangely calm. Not emotional. Not angry. Just clear. That scared me more than rage. Because rage fades. Clarity doesn't. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into the account connected to the card. That's when the full reality hit me. My father hadn't just used the card. He'd used the business expense account linked to my consulting department profile. Technically, the account was still under my authorization management because I oversaw vendor reconciliation systems for external clients. Meaning every charge created a trace. Every transaction created documentation. And somewhere deep in my chest, a very cold realization settled in. Dad thought he borrowed from his daughter. What he actually did was create a financial misuse record tied to monitored spending structures. I leaned back slowly in my chair. What did you do? I whispered. My phone rang again. This time it was Chloe. I answered before I could stop myself. She didn't even say hello. You seriously made Dad feel horrible last night. I blinked. That's your concern? You humiliated him in front of everyone. I almost laughed again. Chloe, he stole from me. Oh my God, stop saying stole, she snapped. You always exaggerate everything. No, actually, I think using someone's account without permission is pretty accurate. She sighed dramatically. You know Dad's been stressed. And somehow that became my responsibility. You make good money, Vanessa. There was the real reason. Not love. Not family. Entitlement. I walked toward the window overlooking downtown Chicago while she kept talking. You don't even have kids, she continued. It's not like you need all that money. I closed my eyes. You don't have kids. I'd heard versions of that before too. As if my life mattered less because it looked different from theirs. What Chloe didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 years quietly building something outside the family. While everyone assumed I was just the boring office daughter. I'd become very good at protecting people from financial manipulation. Because after Mom died, I promised myself nobody would ever leave me powerless again. You know what hurts the most? I asked quietly. What? You really think this is normal? She got quiet for a second. Then she said something that changed everything between us. Well, Dad says you owe the family after everything they sacrificed raising you. I actually stopped breathing for a moment. Owe them. Like my existence came with debt. Like love was transactional. Like I was born signing some invisible contract promising lifelong access to my labor, money, and emotional energy. You know what? I said softly. Enjoy Italy. Then I hung up. A few hours later I got another surprise. An email notification. Credit limit increase request submitted. Requested by authorized secondary user. Thomas Carter. My father. I stared at the screen in disbelief. He wasn't stopping. Even after the restaurant. Even after I confronted him. He was still trying to access more money. And that's when something inside me fully shifted. Because until that moment, part of me still wanted this to be misunderstanding. A selfish mistake. A temporary lapse in judgment. But no. This was a pattern. Belief system. My father genuinely believed my boundaries didn't matter. And if I didn't stop it now, it would never stop. I opened another window on my laptop. Then another. Then another. Transaction history. Authorization logs. Access records. Time stamps. I started organizing everything carefully while my coffee turned cold beside me. Not out of revenge. Out of survival. It is for the first time in my life. I finally understood something about my family. They would keep taking from me until there was nothing left. 3 days later, the Italy pictures started flooding social media. Rome. Venice. Florence. Perfect sunsets. Expensive wine glasses held up for toasts. Smiling family photos with captions like, "Much needed family time, red heart. Grateful for the people who matter most." That one almost made me throw my phone across the room. I was sitting at my desk at work when Chloe uploaded a picture of herself and Dad standing in front of the Trevi fountain. He had his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling like they didn't leave destruction behind before boarding that plane. Caption read, "Finally traveling with people who know how to appreciate family." My stomach twisted. Not because I wanted to go to Italy anymore, but because they needed me to know I'd been excluded. That's what emotional cruelty really is sometimes. Not screaming. Not violence. Just making sure you know you weren't chosen. You okay? I looked up to see Daniel standing outside my office door holding 2 coffees. Daniel worked in compliance auditing 2 floors above me. We'd been friends for almost 6 years, mostly because he was one of the few people at work who never mistook my quietness for weakness. "I brought caffeine and judgment," he said carefully. "You look like you're planning a murder." That made me laugh for real for the first time in days. He sat across from me while I locked my phone screen. "Family," he guessed. I nodded once. He didn't push immediately. That's one thing I appreciated about him. He never treated pain like gossip. But eventually he noticed the spreadsheets open on my monitor. "Vanessa," he said slowly. "Why are you reviewing authorization logs?" I hesitated. Then I told him everything. The charges. The public humiliation. The credit increase request. All of it. Daniel's expression changed halfway through. Not shock. Concern. The serious kind. "Wait," he interrupted. "Your father submitted an unauthorized limit increase attempt through a monitored corporate-linked expense structure?" "Technically, yes." Jesus Christ. I rubbed my forehead tiredly. "I know." "No," he said, leaning forward. "I don't think you understand how bad that is." I stared at him. And that's when he asked the question nobody in my family had asked. "Vanessa, are you safe?" The words hit me harder than I expected. Because emotional damage becomes normal when you grow up around it. You stop recognizing mistreatment after a while. I looked away quickly before my eyes watered. "I'm fine." Daniel gave me a look that clearly said he didn't believe me. "You know what worries me," he said quietly. "You're more upset about hurting their feelings than the fact they exploited you." That sentence followed me the rest of the day. Because he was right. Even after everything, part of me still felt guilty. Like protecting myself somehow made me cruel. That night, I got invited to my cousin Melanie's engagement party. At first, I almost didn't go. But Melanie and I had always been close growing up, and some stupid hopeful part of me thought maybe things would feel normal for one evening. I should have known better. The second I walked into the restaurant banquet hall, I felt it. That weird shift in energy. People smiling too carefully. Conversations pausing for half seconds when I approached. My uncle actually patted my shoulder like someone visiting a funeral. And then came Chloe. Fresh off her European vacation and glowing with attention. "Oh wow," she said loudly when she saw me. "You actually came." I ignored her. Melanie hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." For a few minutes things felt manageable. Then someone asked Chloe about Italy. Big mistake. She immediately launched into stories about vineyards, private tours, and shopping in Milan while people gathered around listening. And somehow, every story included a subtle jab at me. "You know how Vanessa gets about spending. Dad said vacations are more fun without negativity. She probably would have stayed in the hotel organizing receipts." People laughed. Not cruelly. Honestly, that almost made it worse. Casual humiliation hurts differently because nobody thinks they're doing anything wrong. I stood there smiling tightly while my chest burned. Then Chloe took a sip of champagne and said the thing that finally broke the illusion for me. "Honestly," she laughed, "Vanessa acts more like Dad's accountant than his daughter." More laughter. I looked around the table. Nobody defended me. And suddenly I saw the pattern clearly. This wasn't one bad trip. This wasn't stress. This wasn't misunderstanding. My role in the family had already been assigned years ago. Provider. Fixer. Emotional punching bag. And they genuinely expected me to stay there forever. I set my wine glass down carefully. Then I looked directly at Chloe. "You know something funny?" I said calmly. Her smile faltered slightly. "What?" "You think Dad protecting you means he loves you more." The table went quiet. "But someday," I continued softly, "you're gonna realize he only protects people he thinks belong to him." Chloe stared at me. I could tell she wanted to fire back, but for once she wasn't fully confident. Because deep down, she knew I wasn't wrong. I grabbed my purse and left before anyone could stop me. Outside, cold air hit my face while downtown traffic blurred past in streaks of light. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry after family humiliation. I just felt tired. Deeply tired. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A message from someone I hadn't heard from in almost 2 years. My older cousin. The one everybody called dramatic, after she stopped speaking to most of the family. The message was short. "I heard what happened. Call me when you're ready to hear the truth about your father." I stared at the screen while a chill moved through me. But suddenly, this story felt much bigger than one stolen vacation. I didn't call Rachel that night. Honestly, I was afraid to. Families like mine survive by keeping certain truths buried under guilt, loyalty, and silence. And Rachel had spent years being treated like the unstable one for refusing to play along anymore. When I was younger, I believed the stories about her. That she was too sensitive, too angry, too selfish. Now I wondered how much of that had been manufactured. Still, I waited until the next evening before finally dialing her number. She answered on the second ring. "Well," she said dryly, "look who finally escaped the cult." I laughed before I could stop myself. And weirdly, that broke some tension immediately. Rachel always had that effect. She said uncomfortable truths so casually that you either got offended or finally breathed honestly for the first time. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near the river downtown. When I walked in and saw her sitting there, she looked almost exactly the same. Dark curls pulled back, leather jacket, sharp eyes that noticed everything. But she also looked peaceful. That surprised me most. Because the family always described her like she was miserable after distancing herself. Instead, she looked freer than anyone I knew. Rachel hugged me tightly when I sat down. Then she leaned back and studied my face carefully. "They really did a number on you, huh?" I swallowed hard. That was the thing about Rachel. She didn't ask surface-level questions. I stared down at my coffee. I think I kept hoping if I worked hard enough, they'd eventually treat me differently. Rachel nodded slowly like she'd heard that sentence before. "Yeah," she said. "That's how they keep you there." For the next hour she told me stories I'd never heard. About borrowed money that was never repaid. About my father pressuring relatives into financial help. About emotional manipulation disguised as family loyalty. About how anyone who pushed back became labeled difficult, cold, dramatic, selfish, unstable. Rachel herself had loaned my father $15,000 years ago after he promised it was temporary. When she eventually asked about repayment, he told the family she was greedy and obsessed with money. The exact same language he used against me. He needs someone sacrificing for him at all times, Rachel said quietly. That's how he maintains control. I felt physically sick listening to it. Because once you recognize manipulation, you start seeing it everywhere. All the little comments, the guilt, the pressure, the way my accomplishments only mattered when they benefited the family. Rachel stirred her coffee slowly before speaking again. You know the worst part? What? He's probably convinced himself he's the victim right now. And somehow, I knew she was right. That realization hurt more than if he'd been intentionally cruel. Because it meant he genuinely believed he deserved access to me. My time, my money, my emotional energy. Like I existed as an extension of him instead of a separate person. Rachel glanced at me carefully. So, she asked, what are you gonna do? I looked out the window toward the river. I don't know yet. That wasn't completely true. Deep down I already knew. I was just afraid of what choosing myself would cost. A few days later the answer came faster than expected. I was at work reviewing vendor reports when my department director emailed me asking to stop by her office. Immediately my stomach tightened. Not because I'd done anything wrong. Because women who grow up around emotional instability automatically assume every unexpected conversation is bad news. When I walked into her office, she closed the door gently. Vanessa, she said carefully, we flagged unusual external activity connected to your authorization credentials. There was the Italy charges. I sat down slowly. I can explain. I figured you could. To my surprise, she didn't look angry. Just concerned. I explained everything honestly. The family account access. The unauthorized charges. The attempted credit increase. The more I talked, the quieter she became. Finally she sighed. You need to formally separate yourself from this immediately. I know. No, she said firmly. I mean legally. That word landed heavily. Legally. Until then, part of me still viewed this emotionally. Family conflict. Trauma. Messy boundaries. But hearing it framed professionally stripped away all the emotional fog. What my father did wasn't just hurtful. It was fraud. My director slid a folder across the desk. Compliance already started preliminary reviews because of the authorization request. I froze. What does that mean? It means this could escalate if it continues. A heavy silence settled between us. Then she said something unexpected. You know, women like you usually wait too long before protecting themselves. I looked up slowly. What do you mean? You're competent, responsible, empathetic. She gave me a sad smile. People learn to depend on that. And eventually they stop seeing you as a person. That sentence stayed with me all day. That night, I sat alone in my apartment staring at old family photos spread across my coffee table. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, beach trips from when Mom was alive. And I realized something devastating. I couldn't remember the last time I genuinely felt emotionally safe around my own family. Not appreciated. Not useful. Safe. My phone buzzed again. That first call in almost a week. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice came sharp immediately. What the hell did you tell your bank? No hello. No concern. Just anger. I closed my eyes slowly. There are unauthorized charges on my account. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You tried increasing the limit. That was for emergencies. I actually laughed in disbelief. Emergencies? You were drinking wine in Tuscany. You always think the worst of people. That one almost impressed me. The level of manipulation was honestly incredible. You stole from me, I said calmly. For God's sake, stop using that word. Why? Because it's accurate. He went quiet for a second. Then his voice dropped lower. You know what your problem is, Vanessa? I didn't answer. You think because you make decent money you're better than your family. There was again. The resentment. Not toward my success exactly. Toward my independence. Because independence threatens people who rely on guilt for control. I never thought I was better than you, I said softly. Then act like family. My chest tightened painfully. Because that sentence used to work on me. For years. A week after the phone call with my father, the family started getting meaner. Not openly at first. Subtle things. Passive-aggressive comments online. Relatives suddenly unfollowing me. Aunt Denise posting quotes about forgiveness, and selfish people destroying families. Chloe uploading another Italy photo captioned. Some people create peace. Some people create problems. I stared at that post while sitting in my apartment eating leftover takeout straight from the container. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Just done. That scared me a little. Because when you spend years trying to keep relationships alive, the moment you stop caring feels almost unnatural. Like stepping off a moving treadmill. Everything suddenly gets quiet. Rachel noticed the shift immediately. You stopped defending them, she said during one of our calls. I think I stopped defending myself to them too. Good. I smiled faintly. You say that like it's easy. It's not easy, she replied. It's grief. And she was right. People talk about toxic family dynamics like you simply wake up one day and walk away empowered. That's not how it feels. Feels like mourning people who are still alive. A few days later, things escalated again. I got a voicemail from a collections representative asking me to verify several pending travel-related balances connected to disputed international charges. That stopped me cold. Because apparently my father hadn't only used the card. He'd continued spending during the trip after initial fraud flags triggered restrictions. Meaning he knowingly kept charging expenses while access issues were already under review. I sat at my kitchen counter listening to the voicemail 3 times. Then I opened the transaction history again. Luxury shopping in Milan. Private car services. Fine dining. Thousands more. And suddenly something clicked into place. Dad never planned to repay me. Not eventually. Not partially. Never. He genuinely believed he could pressure me emotionally into absorbing the damage permanently. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Chloe. I answered carefully. She sounded irritated immediately. What did you do now? I blinked. Excuse me. Dad's freaking out because the card isn't working. There was not concern. Convenience. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The card was frozen after unauthorized activity. Oh my God, Vanessa, she snapped. We're at a hotel in Florence. And Dad had to use his own card. I actually laughed out loud. Not politely. Not bitterly. Real laugh. Because the absurdity finally hit me. My family genuinely viewed my financial resources as community property. You're unbelievable, Chloe muttered. No, I said calmly. Actually, I'm just finished. She went quiet. Then came the manipulation. You know Dad's blood pressure has been horrible. I closed my eyes. Every boundary I ever tried setting somehow became an attack on someone's health, stress, or emotions. You don't get to weaponize guilt anymore, I said quietly. Wow. No, seriously, Chloe. Listen to yourself. Dad steals from me, excludes me, humiliates me publicly, and somehow I'm still responsible for protecting his feelings. He's still our father. And I'm still his daughter. Silence. Heavy silence. Then I heard her voice soften slightly. You really aren't backing down this time, are you? That question hit deeper than she intended. Because no. I wasn't. For the first time in my entire life. I wasn't. I hope Italy was worth it, I said softly before hanging up. That same evening, Daniel came over with Thai food and a bottle of wine after I admitted I'd been stress working until midnight every day. You know, he said while unpacking containers onto my kitchen island, normal people process trauma without spreadsheets. I process trauma with organization, I replied. That's somehow more concerning. I laughed quietly and poured wine into 2 glasses. For a little while things felt almost normal. Then Daniel noticed the stack of printed documents near my laptop. Transaction records. Authorization reports. Fraud correspondence. His expression shifted. You're building a case. I hesitated. Then nodded once. Vanessa, he said carefully, are you sure you want to do this? That question sat heavily between us. Because this wasn't just paperwork anymore. If I moved forward officially, there would be consequences. Real ones. For my father. For the family. And part of me still struggled with that. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Can I say something honestly? Always. You keep talking about protecting them from consequences. He paused. But nobody protected you from the consequences of their behavior. I looked down at my wine glass quietly. You know what the worst part is? I admitted. If my mom were alive, none of this would have happened. Daniel's voice softened immediately. You really believe that? I nodded slowly. My mom saw me. My throat tightened painfully. She didn't just see what I could do for people. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said something that changed the direction of everything. Vanessa, I think your father picked the wrong daughter to underestimate. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? He pointed toward the paperwork. You work in financial compliance. You understand systems, accountability, documentation, authorization law. He gave me a small look. Your family still thinks you're just the quiet one who pays bills. I stared at him while something shifted slowly in my chest. Because he was right. They didn't actually know me anymore. Maybe they never did. To them, I was still predictable Vanessa. Reliable Vanessa. The daughter who tolerated everything. But while they were busy dismissing me for years, I'd quietly become someone very different. Someone capable. Someone observant. Someone who understood exactly how badly they'd messed up. And meanwhile, my father was still in Italy posting smiling photos online like he'd already won. What he didn't know was that compliance had officially opened a deeper review that morning. And his name was already attached to it. By the time my father came back from Italy, the entire family was pretending nothing had happened. That was always their strategy. Humiliate. Exploit. Then act confused when you didn't magically move on. A week after they returned, Aunt Denise organized a welcome home dinner at her house. Technically, it was supposed to celebrate Melanie's engagement too, but everybody knew the real purpose. Damage control. I almost didn't go. Honestly, I sat in my car outside Denise's house for nearly 10 minutes debating whether walking inside was worth it. Then Rachel texted me. You already survived the hardest part. Stop being afraid of people who needed your silence to feel powerful. So I got out of the car. The second I walked in, I felt every eye shift toward me. Conversations dipped. Smiles tightened. My father stood near the dining room laughing with relatives like nothing in the world bothered him. And Chloe? She looked annoyed that I even showed up. Good. For once, I wanted them uncomfortable. Vanessa. Aunt Denise rushed over too brightly. I'm so glad you came. Translation. Please don't start anything. I smiled politely and handed her the bottle of wine I brought. Then I noticed something interesting. Dad wouldn't look directly at me. Not fully. That tiny detail told me more than any apology could have. He knew something was wrong. Dinner started awkwardly. People overcompensated with forced cheerfulness while Chloe showed everyone vacation photos on her phone for what felt like the 100th time. Look at this one from Florence, she said loudly. The hotel suite was unbelievable. I took a slow sip of water. My father still hadn't spoken to me directly. Then finally, halfway through dinner, he cleared his throat. So, he said casually, you still upset about the misunderstanding? Misunderstanding. There was again. That careful rewriting of reality. I set my fork down gently. No, I said calmly. I'm upset about fraud. The entire table froze. Chloe groaned dramatically. Seriously. Dad's jaw tightened. Vanessa, he warned quietly. No, I replied. You don't get to publicly humiliate me and then reduce it to a misunderstanding. Aunt Denise immediately jumped in. Maybe this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, Rachel interrupted from across the table. Half the room looked shocked she'd even been invited. Rachel leaned back calmly. Funny how honesty always becomes inappropriate when the right people finally hear it. My father glared at her. Stay out of this. She is in this, I said quietly. A lot more than I realized. Silence spread heavily across the room. Then my father sighed dramatically like he was exhausted by all of us. I made a mistake, he said. But Vanessa is acting like I committed a crime. That sentence hung in the air. Slowly, I reached into my bag. The sound of paper sliding onto the table seemed absurdly loud. Transaction records. Authorization logs. Compliance notices. I placed them carefully in front of him. My father frowned immediately. What is this? Documentation. His expression changed as he scanned the pages. Color drained from his face little by little. For the first time all evening. He looked nervous. "You opened an investigation?" Chloe whispered. "I didn't open anything," I replied calmly. "Your father triggered it himself when he attempted unauthorized access modifications." Nobody spoke. Even the air felt heavy. My father pushed the papers away sharply. "This is insane." "No," I said. "What's insane is believing you could repeatedly use my financial credentials without consequences. You're trying to destroy this family over money." That line probably would have worked on me a month earlier. No, I just felt tired. It stopped being about money when you excluded me from the trip while using my account to fund it. His face hardened immediately. "You always think you're the victim." I looked at him for a long moment, then finally said the thing I'd spent years choking back. "No, Dad. I think I was the easiest person to sacrifice." That landed. I saw it hit him. Saw several relatives immediately look uncomfortable. Because deep down, they knew it was true. Rachel spoke softly from across the table. "You did the same thing to me." Dad snapped toward her instantly. "Oh please, not this again." "No," Rachel said firmly. "Actually yes. This again." Then she started talking. About the unpaid money. The manipulation. The guilt tactics. The years of emotional pressure. And suddenly the room shifted. Because once one person tells the truth out loud, other people start remembering their own. Aunt Denise looked down quietly. My uncle avoided eye contact. Even Melanie looked shaken. The illusion was cracking right in front of everyone. Dad realized it too. So he did what people like him always do when control slips. He exploded. "I sacrificed everything for this family," he shouted. "Everything. And we paid for it," I replied quietly. Silence. Complete silence. My father stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Honestly, I think that was true. Because the daughter sitting across from him wasn't the same woman who spent years apologizing for having boundaries. I reached into my purse one last time and pulled out another envelope. "This," I said calmly, "is formal notice that you no longer have access to any accounts connected to my authorization." Chloe looked horrified. Dad looked furious. But underneath the anger, I finally saw fear. Real fear. "You'd do this to your own father?" he whispered. And there was that final attempt to weaponize guilt. But this time it didn't reach me. I stood slowly from the table. "You taught me something important," I said softly. His jaw tightened. "What?" "That being family means nothing without respect." Then I picked up my coat. Nobody stopped me. Nobody argued. Because deep down, the truth was sitting in the middle of that dinner table for everyone to see. My father didn't lose me because I became cruel. He lost me because I finally stopped volunteering to be used. Outside, the cold night air hit my face as I walked toward my car. And for the first time in years, I felt peaceful. Not victorious. Not angry. Free. A few months later, I moved into a new apartment across the city. I started therapy. Started sleeping better. Started saying no without explaining myself. Some relatives eventually reached out quietly to apologize. Others disappeared completely once they realized I wasn't financially available anymore. And my father? We barely speak now. Not because I hate him, but because distance became the only place where I could finally hear myself clearly. Sometimes people ask if I regret reporting the charges. I don't. Because protecting yourself isn't betrayal. And being the dependable daughter should never require becoming the family sacrifice. So if you've ever been treated like your only value came from what you could provide, I need you to hear this. Love that demands your silence, your exhaustion, or your self-respect isn't love. It's control. And walking away from control isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the first honest thing you ever do. If this story hit close to home, share your experience in the comments. A lot more people carry these family wounds than anyone realizes. And if you enjoy emotional real-life stories about resilience, betrayal, and learning your worth, don't forget to subscribe. You never know who might need to hear they're not alone.